This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Hey guys, Big Paul here today with Dr. Todd Lee. What's up, Todd?
What's up, Paul? How you doing?
I'm good, man. So we're going to talk about the Olympia.
Sounds like
Went
a
down.
plan. Sounds like a plan.
Went down at the Olympia. Everything that everybody's been reaching out to me. What the fuck happened to Big Ramy? I posted a video up about it, and I think hurt some feelings with some people. They got mad at me, said I was too hard on him. But I like Ramy. Ramy's my favorite. Well, was one of my favorite bodybuilders, and I had predicted him to win. And it looked like from a week out when I saw the stuff that Dennis James posted that he was well on his way to winning again, but then something fell apart at the end.
Yeah, it sure did. So I watched it on the live stream. I sat through all of that just to see open prejudging, which was 2 in the morning where I live, right? 2 in the morning where you live. And first person comes out is Hany, shredded glutes, and nobody else was pretty much shredded.
Hany was the only one in shape, I thought.
I thought, is there something wrong with the live feed? What's going on? Like, I could not figure out what the fuck was going on. And Derek came out. Derek was pretty shredded. And that was about it. And then the next day, I'm jumping ahead around a little bit. The next day they had the classic prejudging, and they were shredded. About 50% of them were shredded. So I thought maybe it was just the lighting was bad on the main Zappo theater, and you couldn't see anything. And I messaged one of my friends, and he said that the stage is soft, so they're not able to squeeze their glutes. Now, that could account for a lot of stuff, but I noticed that like the lower backs look completely soft. I saw no Christmas trees. I started to get concerned, like, Jesus, I've never not had a Christmas tree in 13 years. What the fuck's going on? Maybe I shouldn't remove deadlifts from my routine because maybe every one of them stopped doing deadlifts, and that's why they don't have lower backs anymore. And their glutes were pretty soft too. So I was like, what's going on with this? And I was like, well, Chris, Hady, Derek are all coached by Hany Rambod, and they all have shredded glutes.
Yep.
So if all 3 of the people with one coach have shredded glutes, if the only 2 people in open have shredded glutes, then, and they're the coach by the same guy, then it's not the lighting. It has to be the coaching. So, a lot of people are saying, well, they're sitting backstage till 2 a.m. They can't hold their look all day. If this was a 9 a.m. prejudging, it would have looked totally different than 2 a.m. prejudging. Personally, I've experienced that myself where I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll look shredded. I'll be shredded all the way up until noon. But by the time I'm on stage at 3 p.m. for prejudging, my glutes are gone. So that's obviously a water and sodium mismanagement. But Ramy, he seemed to have extra soft glutes, especially the upper glute. And I think it was you, pointed out there's a big knot in the upper left glute.
Yeah, he definitely had a knot.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely had a knot. It looked like maybe an abscess or something.
A few people commented that the way he was posing his back, his rear double biceps, he was pinching his scapula together too hard. And basically there was no lat activation. There's no lats, no lumbar muscles. His back was just a wreck, whether it was from posing or not. Fuad pointed out that he had no triceps. I think he was with Dennis James and looked amazing. And the implication from Dennis's subtext was he wasn't with Ramy in Vegas. That the last he saw of Ramy was the week before the show, which I think would be weird. Like, why would you have someone come stay with you for 6 weeks before the show and then let them loose the week before the show to peak on their own without supervision in Vegas? We haven't seen or heard from Chad Nichols before or after the show. That's very strange too. There was a picture, I don't know when the picture was taken, but I know when the picture was posted of Ramy eating pizza. And the implication was that he was eating pizza 2 days before the show. What I know about Chad's diet strategies, at least 10 years ago, were that you over diet for 6 days and then you overload on junk food the seventh day, which is my understanding of how Palumbo does his diets as well. This is not how Hany Rambod does his diets. So I wonder whether he was given a carb up, maybe a preload, a Monday or a Tuesday pizza meal, because I believe George Fair has The Rock eating 7 pizzas. And in my opinion, The Rock's never been in shape in the lower abs, but that's just me. He's an actor, not a bodybuilder. It's a much, much, much lower standard for them. But I think what happened was Ramy ate pizza on Monday or Tuesday, didn't stop eating like shit all the way up until the show. That he just didn't have someone there to control his food intake. Now, my understanding was 8 or 9 years ago, back when he was at Oxygen, he needed to have someone who followed him around and slapped food out of his hands.
Yeah, that
He
was
needed a lot of attention, and you needed a whole village to carry Ramy across the finish line. He wasn't an independent person. Maybe he's matured since then. I hope he doesn't hear this and think that I'm putting him down. I'm merely repeating what I've heard, was that he needed, and I've been in the situations before where I was really bad about my diet, and having people around me to keep me on track was helpful. And I've had preps where I needed no help. It just, some years were different from others. I feel this late into my career, I don't really need to be controlled as to what I eat, but I'm not a 100%er. Like, sometimes I'll end up overeating on the rice or the chicken, or I'll undereat on other things. Certainly in the off season, I undereat. I think just that alone, the lack of 100% adherence, both off season and contest prep, is the only thing that has held me back from being greater this whole time. So I could see that this being either a lack of discipline or an emotional breakdown on Ramy's part, and either comforting himself with food or just not resisting temptation due to not having the proper people in place to keep him on track and carry him across the finish line. He has the resources to afford people to do that. So to me, if I was Dennis James, I would simply charge Ramy more money and then see it through that last week. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Dennis James and Chad Nichols were sitting there with Ramy the entire time he's in Vegas. He never had pizza. He never did anything wrong. And just for no reason at all, he has a lump in his glute, holes in his quads, no lower back. He's posing incorrectly. Everything was just random. But I find that to be hard to believe because of how good he looked for months leading into the show. And then the day of the show.
I want to share my screen with you, but Dennis James recently posted pictures of him 1 week out, and he looked great. Now the lower, can you see my screen?
I can sort of. The thing is because of the way that my setup is,
And no worries, but it's for the audience. But you can
Right.
see like one week out. I mean, he looked. This was 1 week out. He looked great. I mean, he looked full. He looked in shape. I mean, there's cuts in his glutes. Um, I mean, you can see the cuts in his glutes. Triceps look okay. So I mean, that's really odd that everything like here, look, you can see his glutes are in 1 week out. Lower back looks okay. So something happened.
Yeah, I've looked at those pictures. I it isn't just Ramy. That's the confusing part. Is it was everyone except for Hany Rambod's clients.
Well, Chris Aceto said he had it was hard to understand what Ramy was saying, but Chris Aceto had Ramy on a live broadcast on Instagram. I think it was yesterday, and I listened to it. And Chris Aceto talked about how there was a bunch of people there that had COVID. There was so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. And Ramy said that he had a bit of a sniffle. You know, the story I'd heard, I don't know how true it is, but from some people that were there, is kind of lines up with what you were saying, is that Ramy kind of went ape shit with the food, and then they tried to clean it up with diuretics at the end. And when you overdo it and then you try to clean it up with diuretics, then you get that flat and soft look. So who knows? But something seriously went wrong in that last week. And the whole lower back thing is weird too. I heard people speculating that he had nerve damage, but it doesn't look that way from the pics 1 week out.
Everyone can't have nerve damage in just one body part.
Yeah,
I think it's just the fact that because on paper hip hinges don't make any sense for bodybuilding, no one's doing them. And Jordan Peters leaves them in because he says, regardless of what the science is, what I've seen is the people who have from the floor deadlifts have lats that go all the way down into their glutes. And that what he said, and that I used to always have really detailed Christmas tree, but I always left in deadlifts. Deadlifts was one of the staple movements: squat, incline bench, and deadlifts. I mean, I'd have bent rows, I'd have Romanian deadlifts, and I'd have from the floor deadlifts. Like I was heavy focus on that. And so I've always had an overdeveloped lower back and glutes relative to everything else. I've since taken them out. I wouldn't be surprised if this year I don't have a Christmas tree, or at least it's diminished, which would make me think that since nobody does even Romanian deadlifts anymore, like deadlifts have been eradicated from everyone's routines. I mean, Ian and Chris were doing them like crazy. It's not this most recent off season, but the off season before that, Ian dropped them because his glutes were getting too big relative to the rest of him. And all the experts are saying that deadlifts are a great glute exercise. They're a poor hamstring exercise, and they're even worse for back. But it wouldn't surprise me if the lower back gets, because people also phased out the bent rows, the non-supported bent rows, that losing the deadlifts and losing the bent rows is going to have a drastic effect on the look of the Christmas tree, the lower back.
yeah, possibly.
The
I
other
mean,
explanation that for the Barry DeMay post, the reason why no one has good lower backs is because that's where everyone holds their fat, especially when they inject insulin. So they never actually lose the fat there. That the reason why that they don't have shredded glutes and they don't have a Christmas tree is they're simply not lean enough, because the 212 guys had shredded glutes and they had Christmas trees. The classic physique guys had shredded glutes and they had Christmas trees. So it would indicate it may not be a deadlift thing. It could be a conditioning thing, that it's just he said that their lower backs were disproportionately soft for the rest of them. I don't know if that was true. I thought that the lower back is one of the last things to come in. The very last thing on me to come in isn't even the cut glutes as much as it is having the Chinese fan lats, where you have striations in your lats when you contract your lats. When you wind up for the rear lat spread, having two Chinese fans growing out of a Christmas tree. That happens after my glutes come in. So glutes for me would be like an 8 conditioning out of 10 would be Christmas tree. Shredded glutes would be a 9 out of 10 conditioning. And when I have shredded lats in the contracted position, full Chinese fan effect, like Melina from, what do you call it, Mortal Kombat, that would be a 10 out of 10 conditioning for me. Now, maybe I'll get even more conditioned in the future and I'll have a new setting and everything will get phased down one. But that's how I judge whether I'm ready or not, is what does my back shots look like? That's why you need a coach, is you can't see your own back shot.
Yep. Last place it comes off for me is my lower back. my glutes will come in before my lower back.
So that supports my theory that it wasn't the disproportionate at all. Barry DeMay said it was disproportionate. And what was weird is people were angry at him, and he wasn't shit talking, and he was being super respectful. He was saying, this is a legitimate question. Why is it that nowadays people don't have shredded lower backs? And nobody postulated it's a lack of lower back training. Everybody just said he was shitting on people. Even Phil Heath was nice.
I saw where somebody posted up a picture of Hady's lower back compared to Dorian's when he was Mr. Olympia, and Dorian's blew his out of the water. But Dorian didn't do from the floor deadlifts, did he? I don't think he did. I think he just did stiff-legged deadlifts.
He did Romanian deadlifts, but he picked it up from the floor. He did bent rows, but he picked it up from the floor. So he did a deadlift, and then he would row that weight.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't recall him ever doing any heavy deadlifts. Like I've watched his training video. I mean, I never saw him do any. Even with the Romanians, he was never doing more than 405.
Most humans would consider that heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's heavier than nothing.
Yeah.
And if someone's doing nothing, like maybe 200 pounds is all you need to do with the bent rows. You have to get that good solid isometric contraction through the lumbars. But if all your rows go from bent rows and T-bar rows and dumbbell rows to chest supported machine rows on prime and hammer strength, and you went from doing deadlifts and Romanian deadlifts to nothing, maybe glute bridges, you take all lower back, you go from a very lower back heavy training style to no lower back at all, I would expect there to be some atrophy of the lower back.
Yeah, you're probably right. I didn't consider that. I tell you what, Chris Bumstead, he was dialed in.
He was very dialed in. Hany always brings people in.
What do you think? I mean, what do you think that Hany is doing different?
What do I think that Hany does with his athletes?
Hany, sorry. Yeah, Hany, sorry.
That Hany was a natural bodybuilder. And all the shit that I started with, all the hardcore, old school stuff, he still does. That the drugs are supplements to hard training and hard dieting. That everything's the hardest way possible.
So it's just good old fashioned hard work.
Yeah, that the shit that they did in the 90s is what they're doing when you're in the Camp Eva gym.
Yeah, I don't even know. It blows my mind that Bumstead can make weight too. I mean, literally, he's on the stage at the same weight that I am, and I do not look like Chris Bumstead. I mean, it blows my mind.
He was 237.4.
Yeah, we're the exact same height, and I was 237 on stage.
You're 6'1.5".
Yep.
For some reason, I thought you were 6'4".
No, no, we're exact same height. I don't look like Chris Bumstead. He,
That is
he
weird.
he must be dropping a ton of weight like right at the end. Like it just blows me away that he can squeeze in.
Well, last year he was dieting on 1,600 calories.
Yeah, I saw that. That's insane to me.
Yeah, he has to really suffer to get down there to
I
make
mean,
weight.
he has to feel like shit.
Well, maybe what just happened with Derek will happen with Chris.
Go to the open.
I mean, they asked him that as soon as he stepped on stage, like, when are you going to upgrade to open? And he's like, I still have room left to make it into classic. I only was 237. And he was like, I have to work really, really hard. Like, it's not easy for me. I don't know if I'd be able to put on 10 or 20 pounds more muscle.
Well, he also has that autoimmune disorder, right? That he has to be careful with.
Well, my understanding is that him and Ian, since 2018, have properly educated themselves about this. And that whereas they believe they're nephrologists in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if Chris and Ian knew more about that disease than anyone else on the planet, at least insofar as the nutritional limits of someone with that disease. Whereas before, in 2019, he was eating like 100 to 200 grams of protein a day tops. I think that they figured out that that was bullshit and they were holding him back and that he could have eaten a lot more. That whereas he used to use 200 milligrams a test, I know that this most recent offseason he used 500.
Yeah,
That
and people
according to Ian, he's never used any GH.
yeah, people aren't going to believe that. People think that's horseshit and it's fun.
I don't think it's horse. Why even give a number?
Yeah, I know.
Well, he
People
didn't
go,
have to give a number, so why even do it? He finally came out and admitted he doesn't take 200. He in the off season he takes 500, and that he said he used to use a lot more.
yeah.
So when he was coming up, he used more, and then since then they've realized they didn't need it, so they don't use more than they need to.
Well, it doesn't take much to maintain, and my guess is that he probably has to go on the conservative end just to stay in the weight range that he needs to compete.
So let's say we were to approach Chris's cycle the way Ian would approach Ian's cycle, and he's running 750 test plus a secondary agent. Like if he did 750 test and like 300 master on, that's still only a gram. I mean, he's
Yeah.
still coming in at a 60% of upper safe limit mark. He could easily, I think, shoot up to 280, just like before with Derek. And then if they bring him in at even 245 or 255, 7 to 17 pounds, if they brought him in as shredded, I think Chris would make the top. He would make the top 10 in open. And
And
top, I think eighth in open is the same money he makes first in classic.
well, he's the most popular bodybuilder. I'm sure he's making ton. the the prize money's probably
Irrelevant. But
irrelevant to him.
that's kind of my point though, is classic is popular because of Chris Bumstead. If it wasn't for Chris Bumstead, classic would be as unpopular as 212. Ipso
Yeah.
facto, 212 was popular when Flex Lewis was in it. I.e., if Chris did open bodybuilding would be even more popular.
Talking about the 212, Sean Clarita looked amazing.
Yeah. He
What did
came in
he
at 185.
185? I know that's crazy, isn't it?
Well, he was 174 when he won it last time.
Yeah, I mean he's just he's amazing he's the best small bodybuilder of all time.
Well, yeah, but how do you put on 9 pounds? So Legion, he was 174 and beat Sergio and Regan, who were in the 280s, right? And then he puts on 11 pounds of muscle in 13 months, including the contest prep. I don't know how anyone at that age. How old is Sean Clarita? Can you look that up? I think he's
He's got
40.
He's got to be. Well, I mean, maybe he is. He's got to. I would think he's. I think he's in his 30s, isn't he?
I thought he was 40. I
Well,
thought
let's
he had
find it.
20 years of competitive history so far.
Oh no, he's 40. You're right. Right on the money.
Right. So he's only 3 years younger than me. And he just put on 9 or 11 pounds in a year.
Well, Matt Jansen seems to have cracked the code of getting guys huge. He's the guy that's bringing in all the big dudes now.
Who?
Wasn't he working with Lunsford?
No, Hany was with Lunsford.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're right. Hany
Yeah,
was with
first
Lunsford.
and second in open, and first in classic, and first in figure are all Hany.
That's
Hany got
crazy.
Hany got 3 more Olympias. Once Dr. Sonny Andrews starts winning wellness, and Andrew Diu or whatever his name is starts winning physique, Hany will have 5 divisions locked down.
Is it that he's doing something great, or is he just picked the good people?
I think he's always been like that, and they've always been consistent, and they always come in the same. He doesn't fuck up. This isn't even the first time he's had number one and number two. In 2009, 10, and 11, he had one and two.
Yeah.
That he had Nicole Wilkins, who had a reign of about 3 or 4 years with Hany. That he's just the best at every division except for bikini, women's physique, and women's bodybuilding. But all the male divisions. He had Buendia. So he had one of the classic Olympian, one of the open, what are it called? Men's physique
Men's
Olympians.
physique.
He had that dude for years too, Jeremy Buendia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy always looked great.
So there's never a point in which Hany Rambod doesn't have 1 or 2 people walking away with an Olympia trophy every single year. He had Jay Cutler and Phil Heath. That's 9 years in a row. And then he didn't have Sean Roden, didn't have Brendan Curry, and didn't have Big Ramy. But then he comes back with, but during that time period, Hadi was third or second. And Derek was winning first, you know?
Well, whatever he's doing, his guys look great. I mean, Bumstead
Yep.
looked the best I think he's ever looked this year.
Yep. Yep, for sure. Derek looked the best. Hadi looked the best. Bumstead looked the best. I've been following Sydney Gillen, but I think she probably looked her best.
What'd you think about Hadi Chupan?
I thought Hadi's waist came in. That I think Hadi finally had a more symmetrical look. I thought symmetry was Hadi's only flaw. If you looked at like things like the most muscular, Hadi was as big as Brandon Curry. Hadi looked big. When
Yeah.
he's in his poses, he looked big. His quads looked enormous. They're like as big as Ramy's. They're as big as Nick Walker. Hadi was as big as Nick Walker on stage.
How much does he weigh?
I think he's 230 right now.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. I just like 231 is what he weighed in at. So, and he's 5'6".
Yeah, I think Derek was 234. Nick was 255. Brandon was, I think, 258. Ramy was, I think, 296. Samson was, I think, in the 304 or something like that.
Yeah, Samson's huge. And it was Milos that's working with him, right? This past year
Yes.
blew him up. Yeah.
Milos is doing great job lately.
Yeah, he seems to be the one that's packing size on people.
Yes, because it's the his. This is a protocol that I used to think was kind of dangerous, and then Karina pointed out that it was what we were doing ourselves. We just didn't need the insulin. It's just she likes to. Mine's a little slightly different, but it's the pre-workout normal stuff with some leucine and some glutamine and some fast-acting carbs, and then the intra is pretty much the standard intra stuff. It's EAAs, including leucine with some glutamine and carbs. And the post workout is the leucine and the carbs and the EAAs. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, but his is surprisingly identical. That his intra and his post are almost the same. It's like everything's 5 grams leucine, 5 grams creatine, 5 grams glutamine, and on the for all three with, and then the pre has the arginine, the citrulline, the beta alanine, the betaine, and then you've got cyclically branch chain cyclodextrin, and then you normally do Humalog pre, during, and post with Lantus in the morning, and you're using GH first thing on an empty, and you're using GH before bed. So 4 units of GH, 10 units Lantus, and 4 units of GH before bed. And then pre-workout, it's the 5-5-5 with the other pre-workout stuff. And when I say 5-5-5, I mean 5 creatine, 5 glutamine, and then 5 leucine. And then your normal pre-workout stuff. And then you've got the liquid carbs. And he does giant sets. And I think that the giant set training requires the carbohydrates and the insulin. Likewise, using carbohydrates and insulin with Dorian style training is a waste.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I found to be true. That the insulin and the carbs work better with a higher volume style training.
So I don't know whether Milos's programming is as good as Israel's. But the concept of the giant sets, I don't know if Israel would agree with or not. When it comes to Hany has a lot of form execution stuff and exercise selection stuff that the modern day Joe Bennett approach or the Ben Pokulski approach wouldn't necessarily agree with. But I think where Hany's strengths are is the idea that you do absolutely everything fucking possible and you do it as hard as you fucking can. And his style of training is 4 sets of 10 to 12, where the last 2 sets are work sets. So really it's 2 work sets in the 10 to 12 range. And then he has an FST7 set, which is usually the last set that's an isolation set. That's a pump up set.
Yeah.
Hany's formulas with his Evogen line, which he designed, are not dissimilar to Milos. One of the big differences is Hany does not believe in insulin. And of course, there's probably instances where Hany does use insulin, but I don't think, whereas Milos was kind of like the pioneer of insulin and essential amino acids intra-workout. He started that shit. He started the intra-workout drink. He started using insulin. I think that Hany stays away from insulin as a general rule. He doesn't like it, and he is about intra-workout carbs, but he uses the training style for volume training. So both of them are pump-focused volume trainers. Both of them believe in a heavy work set of 6 to 10 on your first compound lift. You know, just like you or I would do a pump-up exercise to activate the chest and get the chest rolling, then you go do a work set of like 8 to 10, and then he would have another work set, Milos, of 4 to 6 for chest with drop sets and set extenders. And then he would go into his hypertrophy pump volume training. This is almost identical to the way Hany Rambod would do it. Hany liked sets of 5 to 7, I believe. You'd have one work set of 5 to 7. And he also liked Dorian's approach of 3 forced negatives and then 5 partial reps. Those are in his normal building style. So Hany and Milos have almost identical training styles. They focus on volume, on pump, but you always have one good heavy set, approximately 6 reps at the first compound lift with intensity modifiers and set extenders. And the biggest difference is Hany invented glycojet, which is his glucose disposal agent, not dissimilar to my battle mead, and that you would take that with the workout instead of injecting insulin. He also does EVP liquid, which is basically glycerol. I put glycerol in a powdered form in my intra workout. So whereas he would have you use glycojet and have you use EVP, the liquid version, I have the Fenris Fury pre-workout and the Battle Meat intra workout. Milos hand makes his from the raw ingredients. Now, Milos did get signed with GHJYM, and I don't know what JYM has. I know that Jim Sapani is an exercise physiologist. He is not a biochemist. And from what he couldn't even explain his own pre workout. He had to hire a biochemist to explain his pre workout in a video because he can't seem to talk on camera. But I wouldn't imagine that Milos is actually using the JYM stuff. I think he just accepts the endorsement. And he probably endorses the pre-workout or the EAAs or the glutamine, but I think he takes the JYM raws and then makes his own concoction for the intra and the post, and then physically trains people like Regan or physically trains people like Samson.
Yeah, I've heard he's there with them. That's the important part of it. Making sure they're not going hypo and making sure they're training properly. And I know he shoves the insulin pretty hard. I've seen some of the doses.
My understanding is that what he does is as much as 10 Humalog.
I've heard more, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, was it 10 pre, 10 during, 10 post?
Yeah.
Right. But that's with 100 grams of carbs pre,
Correct.
100 grams of carbs during, 100 grams of carbs post, and that's a 2-hour workout. So we're really talking about 100 grams of carbs and 10 insulin every hour.
Yeah.
So only one every 6 minutes. But yes, and that's something that I had just said before is Milos's protocols are extreme and they sound dangerous, and I wouldn't do them unless I had Milos standing right there.
Yeah.
So like, I don't think I need the insulin because I'm so insulin sensitive as is, but I wouldn't want to even fuck around with that unless I had someone as responsible as Karina or you training with me. And then you'd want it to be the same person for every workout all the time. You wouldn't want to have a good, solid training partner on one body part, but use insulin on the other days. Or nor would you want to use insulin that extreme, 30 units of insulin on one body part and no other day, because then your body's going to be super sensitive to it that day and it's going to be overkill.
Yeah. Well, his approach is interesting, that's for sure. Maybe because Hany doesn't use it, maybe that's why his guys come in tighter.
Yeah, its big picture is the goal is to win the Olympia, not to be the biggest, most muscular person.
Yeah, I mean, and I wonder if his guys are running in the off season though, and they just drop it during prep.
My understanding is they don't use it
Ever. Okay.
Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the amount of GH required them to use Lantus. But knowing Hany, I would think if they're using so much GH that they need Lantus, he'd have them use more glycogen instead.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, what is a typical? I mean, I wonder typical GH dose for those types of guys. People have these crazy ideas of what people are running.
I don't think anybody, and I mean anybody, uses more than 8 units. And I think universally 6 units is a sweet spot.
Yeah, I
And
mean
I
that's
think that to stay under the insulin resistance threshold, most people need to cap it at 4 or 5. I remember I talked to Seth Feroce in 2011 when he was working with Hany, and his GH was, I told him I was having issues with my GH. How much do you use? And he was like, what are you at? I'm like 6. He's like, go down to 5. 5's where I like to be. And that's worked perfect for me. So hearing it from Seth Feroce, that it implied, and I'm not putting words in his mouth and I'm not pointing fingers at Hany, it sounded to me like Hany had Seth Feroce at 5 units GH. And Seth was competing in the 202 class at that time.
I always laugh when these gym bros think that guys are taking 20 units of GH. I'm like, well, one, who the fuck could afford that? I mean, pro bodybuilders aren't making enough money to afford running that much GH. And then the insulin resistance, and I've played around. I've experimented with going up to as high as 10 before, if I go up to 8, I can't feel my hands. My hands in my fasted glucose levels will get up in the 120, 130s.
I remember there's one time I was just using D-ball, IGF-1, DES at the same time, and I got a pump so extreme in my arms, I couldn't hold the dumbbell. So I had a debilitating pump.
I remember
10,
coming off a contest for prep rebound and getting these insane calf pumps where I would just walking, my calves would get so pumped I couldn't even walk.
and then middle of the off season, even when my insulin sensitivity is good, it's like really exciting to get a pump because it's pretty hard to get one now.
Yeah, it goes away in the off season, but I imagine that probably has to do with your insulin sensitivity declining. I don't know. You tell
What
me.
that's the weird part is that my insulin sensitivity is fine. I think it's just like your kidneys are so efficient at filtering sodium, and you're always so bloated and stretched out that there's no real relative change.
Yeah, the best pumps I ever get are right after coming off contest prep.
Or after a deload week, I find that the week back from a deload, I get the most insane my muscle connection, the most insane pumps.
That's something I haven't done in a while as a deload. Although I wasn't training that hard after being sick with the pneumonia and stuff. So I don't know. I need to get back to my routine. I've just been kind of coasting.
Yeah, I hate coasting. Coasting is the most depressing thing ever. You're just
Yeah,
wasting time.
yeah, it is. This week I hit it hard. Or this past week I finally been able to hit it hard again. I know you were talking about kind of feeling back to normal now.
Yeah, I finally started feeling back to normal. My last 3 workouts were incredible workouts. I've got legs today, and I really don't feel like going in because it's a snowstorm. But then the gym's closed down until Monday because of Christmas. So it's like I either go in the third day in a row and push my luck, or I take 3 days off.
All right, dude. I'm going to put your contact information down in the video description, guys, if you want to get in contact with Todd for coaching, supplements, consultations.
Yep.
I assume you still do consultations, right?
Yep. Consultations, coaching, lifestyle, and competition coaching. Me and Karina Dotson work together on all the coaching clients. And I also own the supplement company, Valhalla Labs, and designed all the products. And that I think that covers it. Yeah.
I'll have everything in the video description if you want to get in contact with Todd. All right, guys, take care.
See you later, buddy.